Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Essential, The Devil's Diva reaches a turning point in her life with this powerful E-Steam series story. Get E-Steam Essential at online booksellers today. Star Wars is the new Transformers. And in order to understand that statement, you have to understand the history of 1986's The Transformers, the movie. Now, The Transformers, the movie back in 1986 was an attempt by Hasbro Toys to try to transition from an older group of toy buyers to a new group of toy buyers. And they hoped to transition from that older group of toy buyers, which were kids from my generation, to the newer group by killing off many popular characters that many kids grew up forming a relationship with. Now, over the course of the first 10 minutes of the Transformers the movie, they killed off many of the G1 iconic characters like Ratchet, Ironhide, Prowl, Wheeljack, and many others, and this all built up to a climax where Optimus Prime was killed by Megatron. And during this movie, as it was played on many screens across the country, many people were extremely upset, and many children were upset because back in the 1980s, a lot of children were latchkey kids, and they formed relationships with these characters of Optimus Prime, Prowl, Ratchet, Starscream, and many other Transformers that were part of the Generation 1 cartoon show. So they formed relationships with those characters, and those characters became like their friends. So watching their friends die on screen, that left a very bitter taste in many children's mouths. And the bitter taste was felt so badly that no matter what Hasbro tried to do to sell their new characters like Cup, RC, Springer, and Rodimus Prime, they couldn't move those toys at all at the toy store. And thanks to them trying to transition from those older kids to the younger kids and this effort where they killed off all these characters, the Transformers brand collapsed. It literally collapsed for 9 years. It did not come back until Beast Wars came back and brought back something similar to the old characters. And it really started to come back around 1999 2000 when they saw a direct connection to the original Generation 1 characters in that period. When they saw that connection, that's when Beast Wars really started to ramp up and people really started to get back into Transformers again. Now, I look at Star Wars and I see eerie parallels between Hasbro's failed campaign to move the audience forward with the Transformers to what they're doing with this new trilogy. Now, George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney a couple of years ago for a couple of $1 billion. And after that, Disney decided they wanted to make several new Star Wars movies and create a new trilogy with episodes 7, 8, and 9. And episode 7 was, while it made a lot of money, was poorly received by the audience. And one of the reasons why it was poorly received was they killed Han Solo. And that really left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, in addition to the story, which introduced several new characters that just didn't really connect with the audience. And when I look at those characters like Finn and Rey and Kylo Ren, they remind me so much of Rodimus Prime, RC, and Cup, and Galvatron. They remind me of those Transformers towards the season after the during the movie, second half of the movie, and starting of season 3. Now, all those new characters were meant to get people of the next generation excited about Transformers, and those new characters in Star Wars were meant to get people excited for Star Wars again. And unfortunately, again, what they underestimated was the relationship people had with many of those old characters. They formed a deep relationship. People over the last 40 years have formed relationships with characters like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, R2D2, and many others. And that relationship was very special to people of Gen X and part of the baby boomer group because This was a movie that defined our generation, and one of the movies that defined kids who grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, the group I came from. It was one of our defining movies. I mean, Star original 4, 5, 6 trilogy, that was an iconic movie. And for us to see a character that we grew up with as a friend, Han Solo, killed in the first movie in such a nonchalant way by this Kylo Ren, that's what started to leave a sour taste in a lot of Star Wars fans' mouth. And even worse than that was seeing this Rey character who literally slapped a lot of people in the face as it related to Luke's story. Now, Luke's character transformation arc is a powerful one because we see this young guy who just wanted to go out and live his life and he wanted to pursue his dreams. And we saw this character who, with Rey, who didn't really have much of a dream, much of a goal, nor did she have much of a character transformation arc. Luke had to go on a journey to learn the ways of the Force and master the Force. And with Rey, we saw all of that trivialized because she could literally do anything that Luke and Han over 3 movies had to learn. I mean, Luke had to learn how to use the Force. He had to learn about the Force in Episode 4. He had to learn how to understand the Force in Empire Strikes Back. And he had to learn overall how to use the Force and things for Return of the Jedi. And he had to find a way to redeem his father in Return of the Jedi. With these movies, 7 and 8, we're not seeing any sort of character transformation arc with this Rey character. And a lot of people look at that Rey character and it reminds us so much of Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime because Hot Rod he was an arrogant guy who thought he knew everything. And then all of a sudden, they give him the matrix of leadership from Optimus Prime. They put him in a leadership role. And he was this really insecure guy who really could not make good decisions. And the reason why was because they thrust him in this role and then they never gave him any sort of character development or character transformation arc that led us to believe that he was some sort of competent and capable leader of the Autobots. The same thing with this Rey character. We never got to see any sort of character transformation arc. The same thing with this Kylo Ren. I mean, Darth Vader was a character we saw how he became this character in episodes 1, 2, 3, which weren't really that great, but at least they showed us a foundation for why he became Darth Vader because everybody put him on a pedestal and made him out to be some sort of godlike figure. And that's one of the things that led to him becoming corrupted. But with this character, we're not seeing this. This Kylo Ren, yes, he's Han and Leia's son, but he just comes across as extremely emotional and dysfunctional. And one of the reasons why I believe he comes across that way is because, over the last couple of years, we have many of these people who come from these single mother households, and the way Kylo Ren acts is just like a guy who comes from a female headed household. He's melodramatic, he's loud, he's emotional, and that's not a thing that we saw back in the 70s when original Star Wars came out. Original Star Wars came out, we saw a lot of people, they came at it from an approach of a two-parent household. So we saw, Luke being in control of his emotions, in control of his feelings. We saw Han control of himself. We saw them all being able to navigate through their emotions. But with this series, we see a bunch of people who really don't have control over their emotions. They really don't have a set of direction for themselves. And people are looking at this and saying that this trilogy, it's really uneven, but as I see, it's like a commentary on the times about how dysfunctional things have become over the last couple of years. But when I look at this again, I see Transformers the movie. They're trying to transition from those old characters to these new characters, not knowing that they're alienating people. And I think a lot of people came out of Last Jedi really alienated because they look at the story and they see a story that's really uneven and unbalanced. Because as I read the synopsis for Last Jedi, I saw a story that really wasn't cohesive with episodes 1 through 6. And I really didn't see things as related to Luke that really were there in episodes 4, 5, and 6, because Luke's original destiny towards the middle and the end of middle of Empire and towards Return of the Jedi was about him bringing balance to the Force. We didn't see that with this character as it related to his relationship with this Rey character, and that's a core component of who Luke Skywalker is. And then we saw the character himself acting out of character, and that was another thing that turned people off. And that's again another reason why I see this Star Wars becoming like Transformers, and I'm seeing Episode 8 being a lot like Transformers the movie that will turn people completely away from Star Wars. Now Disney probably thought, oh, we'll kill off all these characters like Luke and Han and Leia in some ways, because I think she's still alive, but the way they destroyed her ship and she's supposed to be floating in the air again, that's so contradictory to the Force in 1 through 6 that it's just unbelievable, especially with 4, 5, and 6 and the way Luke was using the Force, because he says the Force is supposed to be used for defense, it's not supposed to be used for offense. And I doubt you would use the Force to be flying in space after a ship blows up. It's never worked that way, because he says it's supposed to be, Obi-Wan said it's supposed to be energy flowing around us and flowing in the things around us and things in us. So if it's supposed to be flowing, you would think, again, somebody who understands the Force would not be floating in the air. They'd be creating some sort of field or something like that to protect their ship, or some way, or coming up with some way to maneuver the ship. That's the way I would see the Force working. But as it relates to this story, it's clear to me that the screenwriter had no sense of what the Force is as it related to Star Wars, and they had no sense of what these characters really were and what they were about. And they thought, Disney thought, and the screenwriter thought, and the director probably thought, oh, we'll get rid of all these characters. And the way they did it is what really made a lot of people angry, I believe. I believe what makes people angry is that Disney just trashed their past and their childhood and their relationship with these characters in the same way that Hasbro trashed many children, like from my generation's relationship with characters like Optimus Prime, Megatron, Ironhide, Starscream, and they paid for that when people said, you know what, I'm done with Transformers, and they walked away from the Transformers brand. And after that, again, Transformers completely declined for 9 years. You could not give any of those new Transformers away. I remember being in stores where I saw Power Master Optimus Prime for $14.99 at Woolworths. I saw Trypticon for $14.99 at a Korean store. And I saw many of those Transformers that were post-movie. No one wanted anything to do with them because they saw how callous the owner Hasbro was with these kids' childhood. The kids were just so hurt by it. They decided they wanted nothing to do with it. And I see the same thing happening with many Star Wars fans, because many Star Wars fans are now feeling this and they're saying to themselves, you know what, I invested so much of my life into this movie and this movie franchise, and they callously just threw away all the things that were important to me about the story and the relationship I have with these characters. And this is something Disney really underestimated with the Star Wars franchise. They were so eager to get the new kids, they didn't understand that you needed the older fans in order to be able to share it, because in order to sell something to the next generation, they have to see a value to it from the previous generation. And with Star Wars, there was a great relationship there, and people were passing it on from generation to generation. But with this movie, they really slapped many fans of that franchise in the face. And when I look at what they did with it, again, I just also see not only 86's Transformers the movie, I also see what DC Comics did in 2011 with the New 52, because DC Comics in 2011 decided, oh, we don't want these older fans anymore, so we're going to wind up canceling all of our series that had been running for 75 years and then relaunch them all with this whole New 52 campaign. And they suffered as well, because many fans felt betrayed. They felt like they had been slapped in the face because, again, Dan Dido and the owners of Warner Brothers were so callous in canceling series that people had collected for 25, 30, even 40 years, because I go to Comic Cons, and there were fans of these characters that go back, and some of these people have been collecting these comics for 35, 40 years, and they were just told, oh, all this relationship we had with these characters, it no longer matters. We're going to just arbitrarily cancel all these series and then tell you to go buy these new series with these new characters and these new costumes. And then what happened was most people wanted nothing to do with DC after that. I mean, after that, you cannot sell any DC comics, you can't sell any DC merchandise, and all of the DC movies have struggled, and one of the reasons why they have struggled was due to that reboot, which slapped most of the customers in the face. And it seems like there's a trend with most of these sci-fi and fantasy franchises, the corporate owners, and they don't seem to understand the value of having a relationship with the customer or the long-term relationship with the customer. When I look at what happened with Star Wars, I see a corporate entity, Disney, that didn't understand the relationship. They were so eager to get profits off this new trilogy, they didn't see how the original trilogy profited so many and why the story was so important. They were just thinking about money. They were not thinking about the relationship that people had with these characters. Because as a writer myself, I understand how important that relationship is to with those characters to those readers. Those characters become like people's friends. They are literally like a friend, especially for many kids who grew up in latchkey homes or homes where they didn't have a family where that was meeting their needs. A lot of people, these were the people who were their friends. These were the people who were like family. These were the people they were close to. And when they see people that they were close to being killed and then killed in a callous way, that hurts those people. And that's why a lot of people are coming out of Star Wars and saying, hey, I'm done with Star Wars. In the same way, Transformers fans said, hey, I'm done with Transformers. And DC Comics fans said, hey, I'm done with DC. They're saying that they're done because they feel like if the company does not respect my relationship with these characters, then why should I respect this company by going out here to spend more money on your products? And I look at these companies, and again, they show their callousness. I mean, with the way Last Jedi was, I mean, the way Luke was treated in this movie, that was really callous. The way they killed him off and the way they killed Han Solo off. And the way I see it is, if these characters are legends, they're icons, and they needed to be treated with the utmost of respect. This is a part of American mythology, and if it's a part of American mythology, then we need to let their legend stay on. I mean, one of the great things about American mythology is that people can add on to it and have their own, but they can only add on to it if they feel like there's a relationship there that makes them care. And what happens with these corporate entities, like Disney, is that they don't give you a reason to care. I mean, if you kill off the characters that people care about, or you discard the characters people care about, then people cannot add on to the mythology of those characters. The way I would have done Star Wars was like this. I would have left episode 4, 5, and 6 as the benchmark. I would have not touched any of those characters at all. I would not have touched Luke. I would not have touched Han. I would have not touched Leia, Chewie, C3PO, R2D2. I would have left them alone because in a sci-fi world of a galaxy far, far away and a long time ago, you can create another story in another place with other characters and another conflict. You did not need to use those core characters from the original trilogy. You could have created a new trilogy set in a different era, a couple of centuries later or a couple of decades later, and it could have been, references to things like Luke bringing balance to the Force, references to Han Solo's escapades on the Millennium Falcon. It could have been references to characters like the C3PO and R2D2. It could have been references to Princess Leia's sacrifices from many years ago. And you could have done that story with all new characters and created an all new mythology, but using the original trilogy as the foundation and not involving the old characters. People seeing the old characters being never growing, never changing, and still being stuck in some sort of vicious cycle, that was a turnoff to a lot of people. What they wanted to see was these characters growing. They wanted to see, Luke bringing that balance to the Force. They wanted to see, Han and Leia's kids being Jedis or something like that. They didn't want to see emo Kylo Ren who looks like he comes from a single mother household. They didn't want to see Rey, who knows everything and never has a point of growth. They didn't want to see Finn, who comes off as emasculated and weak. They wanted to see characters which would grow. And we got that from Expanded Universe and many of the video games, but we didn't get it in this new trilogy. And that was really the most disappointing thing. And that, again, reminded me so much of what Hasbro tried to do with Transformers, the movie. They tried to make this movie to try to move people forward, but unfortunately, they wound up falling backward because they didn't understand the relationship that people had with these characters and why that relationship was important to them. As a writer myself, I understand how important people's relationship with these characters are, and I always make efforts to try to protect characters and preserve characters so that people who have a connection with that character can see that character stay the way they are. And if I want to add something or expand something, I do it in a way that preserves the integrity of that character and preserves the integrity of their story. Now, one of the ways I did that was in one of my series, the Spinsterella trilogy. I wanted to make sure the Matilda Crowley character stayed consistent, and I didn't want to do things to damage the character because I understood many readers had a relationship with them. And other characters I had, like John Haynes, I didn't want people to be like, oh, this character, I'm just going to be so callous as to get rid of them. Because I understand that when people read these stories, they form relationships with these characters. And the way I see the way people at Star Wars, I mean, Disney did the Star Wars characters, that was reprehensible and egregious to do that to all those fans. To just say, you know what, all those characters you grew up with for over 40 years, we're just going to get rid of them. You can go watch the movies with these other characters. And if you do that, again, that's a slap in the face to all those fans and all those people who invested in these characters and invested money in the product. Those people, they deserve to be acknowledged, they deserve to be respected, and they deserve, to be appreciated for all their time that they spent supporting this franchise over 40 years. That Last Jedi, as I see it, was like the last straw for many Star Wars fans, and I doubt Episode 9 will have the box office of Episode 8. And this will be a hard lesson for Disney in the same way it was a hard lesson for Hasbro after they callously insulted all those Transformers fans by killing off their favorite characters and treating the mythology of the Transformers with such little respect. And this is what Disney has done with Star Wars, and this is going to be a hard lesson for them in customer service and how to form a relationship with the customer as it relates to sci-fi and fantasy franchises. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct fantasy titles like the ISIS series, the East Eden series, the Temptation of John Haynes, or if you want to try the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.